Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me for another episode of the Before I Go podcast. This is the 40th episode of this podcast. 40 weeks. It started out as something that I did on a whim because I had things I wanted to say, stuff in my head that I had to get out. And for the most part, that is still the case. However, there have been times over the past 40 weeks that I tried to come up with topics that I thought you wanted to hear instead of just saying what was on my mind. I have to remind myself that what I have to say is valid. And when I do, the episodes come much easier. I have to take my own advice and stay true to who I am. Otherwise, this stops being fun and the joy disappears. And if there is no joy, then what is the point? Honestly, I struggled with developing this episode. I kept asking myself, what do they want to hear? Then I had to switch it to, what do I want to say? Then it came to me. 6 weeks ago, I published an episode entitled, Is It Time for a Change? It's episode 14, and if you haven't listened to it, I encourage you to do so. In that episode, I talk about how you can know if it's time for a change. There are 5 ways that I listed, and I went back and consulted that list while developing this episode because I feel like it may be time to change things with the podcast. As a refresher, the 5 ways are feeling comfortable yet restless, wanting to feel a greater sense of purpose, something has reached its natural end, feeling like you're living in the past, and it's been a long time since you've made a move. I feel like I've checked all those boxes. So in this episode, I want to talk about embracing the change once you've made it. Change is not easy. I'll be the first one to admit it. Comfort zones are called comfort zones for a reason. They're comfortable. And who doesn't want to be comfortable? 5 weeks ago, I made a huge change in my life when I decided to stop drinking and live an alcohol-free lifestyle. Ironically, that change was made 4 days after the episode I published about making a change. At the time, I didn't know what alcohol freedom would look like. And it was not my intention to turn this podcast into a platform that spotlighted alcohol freedom. That still is not my intention. However, I will say that in the future, more episodes will have that theme. Not all, but some. Why? Because it's a huge part of my life. And if I can share about my divorces, my failed attempt at being an entrepreneur, I can talk about being broke. I can certainly share about my decision to stop drinking. Since making that decision, I have learned to embrace that change, a change that I was so hesitant to make. Why the hesitation? Why do any of us hesitate to make a change, especially when the change will lead to a better lifestyle or to a better quality of life? Why do we hesitate to leave toxic relationships? Why do we hesitate to go to the doctor? Why do we hesitate to go to a therapist? Why am I hesitating to buy a new stove? Is it possible that making these decisions could alter our lifestyles in ways that we cannot imagine? Is our fear of the unknown causing the hesitation? I can't speak for you, but that probably is the case for me. I mentioned before about staying in relationships far longer than I should have because it was just easier to stay until it wasn't. I felt the same way about drinking. I have felt for years that I should probably stop drinking. I hesitated because I love wine. Love it. And that love caused me to make excuses and rationalizations for why I didn't have to quit. It was an abusive relationship. Wine was making me feel bad about myself, but I just couldn't let it go. Eventually, I thought I should just cut back. However, when I saw that I was actually unable to cut back, then I knew there was a problem. So I stopped completely. And even though I'm only 5 weeks into this, I am noticing so many positive changes. Not just the physical changes like no more hangovers or that I'm sleeping better and that I've lost weight, but also other changes like I've included meditation into my daily routine and I'm reading more and thinking more clearly. Speaking of meditation, it is something that I have attempted several times over the years, but it just never stuck. I didn't get it. This time, I see how meditation is not only about the time that I actually spend in meditation, but how it makes me feel afterward. I'm able to observe my thoughts from an objective place and keep what I need and release the rest. And I know that probably sounds all hippy dippy, but it is how I feel. The ability to get out of my head and control my thoughts instead of allowing them to control me and just stay in the present moment is a gift. All my previous stress and anxiety all started with thoughts that I allowed to run rampant. Now, when an unhelpful thought comes into my head, I observe it, name it, and release it. And then I'm free to move on. Think about it. How many times has a thought popped into your head, presumably from nowhere, and you dwelled on that thing, and then you find yourself in a bad mood and can't explain why? It's happened to me countless numbers of times. One of the best practices that I have adopted on this journey of alcohol freedom was to be intentional about replacing alcohol with something else. I have replaced alcohol with a lot of things. I mentioned the meditation, but I also drink tea in the evening. I read before bed. I have a stack of books on my nightstand that you would not believe. And I take nice, long, hot baths. I'm learning that alcohol freedom is about so much more than just the alcohol. Admittedly, in the beginning, that is all it was about. But over time, it's turned into something else. It means so much more. It has changed me. And I really thought that I was too old for real substantive change. You absolutely can teach an old dog new tricks. Change doesn't have to be scary. It can be exciting. I'm going to embrace this change, and I hope you'll stick around and see where it goes. If not, that's cool. Thanks for listening. Well, that's all I have for today. But before I go, let me share this with you from George Bernard Shaw. Progress is impossible without change. And those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything. I'll see you next time.